This is Classibon on the west coast of Ireland. You may ask yourself, why is a remote castle on the Atlantic fringes in the opening scene of a film concerned with matters relating to the dark heart of aristocratic Central Europe? For Classibon is no ordinary Gothic monolith of the aristocrats. It was the former blood sports lodge of none other than His Serene Highness of the Grand Duchy of Hesse, Prince Louis Francis Albert Victor Nicholas of Battenberg, otherwise known as Earl Louis Mountbatten, the late cousin of the present Queen Elizabeth. When Mountbatten was not playing games with the lives of British and Canadian servicemen during the Second World War by sending them on futile suicide missions, or causing the death of millions of Hindus, Sikhs and Muslims with the partition of India, nor indeed attempting to overthrow a democratically elected British government in order to establish himself as the imperial Kaiser of the British Empire, Mountbatten partook in the raping of teenage boys, abducted by a network of Orange Lodges and Freemasons from the Kincora Boys' Home in Belfast, and which were taken very often on a one-way journey to his blood sports lodge here in County Sligo. Mountbatten, the mentor of the current Prince of Wales, was not human in the way the rest of us are. The Romano-Prussian aristocratic DNA within his being was far from unusual. With the exception of the murdered Princess Diana, an aristocratic anomaly in that she was born with a sense of innate compassion and decency, they are all infected by the same consciousness parasite which their bloodline has carried from Babylon to Buckingham Palace. While the Spencer family have long provided sexual comfort and breeding units for the Romano-Prussian aristocrats currently residing on the British crown, a grave error was made with Diana Spencer, which had to be corrected, and indeed was, in an underpass in Paris when her womb became surplus to the royal breeding stock. Sexual and vicious trauma inflicted upon commoner children and wretched women is the ultimate blood sport of the Romano-Prussian aristocrats, and their agents continue to supply them with fresh meat to this very day. It is said that history is a monument built upon the glorious dreams of men. Rarely is it ever spoken that history is more likely to be built upon the psychedelic visions and waking terrors of powerful monsters.
Ihr seid nicht tot. Ihr lebt. Gebt euch.
On the 25th of February 1947, the victorious Allied Control Council formally proclaimed the dissolution of Prussia, placing much of the blame for World War II on the legacy of Prussian militarism and bureaucracy as the initial inspiration for the creation of and also the territorial objectives of the Third Reich. However, there were other reasons for the Allies so effectively wiping Prussia off the map and out of the consciousness of Western ideology. The United States was in many ways the bastard offspring of Prussian ideology, especially the American education model. The British aristocracy had spent the better part of the previous 200 years attempting to interbreed with Prussian nobility, while the French and Russians both had a historical vendetta of their own to settle with the Prussians. To the elite and upper social echelons of the Allied powers, Prussia was viewed as a dark family secret, and the defeat of the Third Reich finally gave them the opportunity to bury it once and for all. Doing so not only allowed them to smother Prussia's dark secrets, but also the dark secrets of their own. For everything the Western elite hold dear to this day, the use of education to mind control the masses, absolute servitude to the state, and along with rampant imperialism and military expansion, were all inspired by the creation of and the history of modern Prussia. The focal point of this legacy was the greatest Prussian leader, Frederick II, or, as he was commonly known, Frederick the Great. As the Soviets removed his statue from its plinth in Berlin, they knew precisely what the symbolism of their actions were. For the personality cult which grew up around Frederick the Great was Germany and the eternal paradox of the German soul, a paradox created by a powerful psychedelic experience which Frederick underwent as a young man while in prison, and one also very similar to that experienced by Adolf Hitler upon hearing of Germany's surrender in 1919. This is why, on Walpurgis Night 1945, the only portrait hanging inside Hitler's Berlin bunker, 16 meters under the ferocious bombardment of the Red Army's heavy artillery, was that of Frederick the Great, whom Hitler was attempting to channel, while hoping to invoke the miraculous powers of his Prussian hero king to kill the Allied leadership with a psychic attack. For never is German leadership and aristocracy far from the occult forces, and by extension, neither are the British aristocrats who carry Prussian blood in many of their veins. A consanguineous conduit of dark occult infatuation which they practice inside their stately homes to this day, for what infected Frederick the Great inside his prison cell is carried in the bloodlines from generation to generation through the inbreeding of noble blood. This is that little told story, a story which comes from Prussia with blood. Who are these people? Who are they really? Who do they represent? Why this lack of compassion? Why these decades of cruelty, and why are they all Germans? You all know that the Queen's family is not Windsor. They changed they changed their names in 1914 to sound more English. But they were all speaking German in Buckingham Palace. It just sounded more British. Now, we never hear about Prussia. We never hear about this state in northern Germany that existed until about the 1870s. We don't hear much about it. We don't hear what this place was, where it came from, how it developed, and what its lasting influence on the world was. Prussia basically extended from the Baltic republics around where Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, those kinds of places, along the Baltic Sea, across northern Poland area, into northern Germany, and up a little bit into Denmark, and down south, not quite as far as Bavaria, but a good chunk, and then also a bit of Holland. So it just goes to show you, this was quite a huge geographic area in European terms. It probably was about the same size as modern United Germany, except it was flipped kind of upward, sideways rather than north-south. But geographically, in terms of physical landmass, it wasn't small, it was huge. Now, Prussia was a different kind of Germany than the rest of the German states. At that time, you'd be quite surprised, up until the creation of the German Empire under Bismarck, there was probably about 11 to 1,200 German countries in that area. Germans speak duchies, principalities, but a vast amount of them. And there was Saxony, there's loads of them. There were Bavaria, and there's tons of small ones that were spread all across because of various conflicts in history, had spread across that area. Now, the Prussians, like the Germans, like when I was researching for Walpurgis Night, I came to be very sympathetic to the German people. because I see the German people have been changed. If you look at the Germans prior to what the Prussians changed with them, they were just like the Anglo-Saxons or the Celts or the Vikings. They were kind of a wild people, and they had a very rich, deep, magical culture. And that's not something you associate with Germans at all.